So in case you've been living under a rock for the past month, the Saudi government has officially announced NEOM, an ultra-high-tech region of the future, made up of Trojana, an LSD user's idea of a mountain resort, the Oxagon, the floating surveillance dystopia, and of course, the Line, the futuristic line-shaped city cutting straight through the landscape. And we're going to take a look at them now. First, Trojana, which is a mountain resort on crack, complete with a huge concrete artificial lake, some bizarre mirror cave, a portal connecting the digital and the physical, a vertical village where people are transported by balls, some ultra-luxury housing, and the world's most advanced healthcare and well-being center, to nourish both body and soul. Now, believe it or not, this is the least stupid part of NEOM and is generally feasible if we leave out all the bizarre shapes. But as soon as the Saudi dictator wants something more complicated than a mountain resort, things start going downhill pretty fast. Enter the Oxagon, a chimera of seaport, high-tech industry and residential areas, half of it floating on the sea. 100% renewable energy, fully automated seaport, clean, advanced manufacturing, research and innovation, buzzword. However,
this is a cognitive city that not only adapts to your needs, but will learn to anticipate them.
It's just a fancy way of saying you'll be under constant surveillance by the Saudi state. And I'm sorry, you are building in the open desert. You have virtually unlimited space at your disposal. Why is half of this thing floating on the sea, blocking the way to your commercial seaport? And now you also run the risk of having a cargo ship ram into your city, not to mention the damage severe weather could do. Also, are you going to invent environmentally friendly cargo ships as well? Because those are some of the worst polluting vehicles on the planet. But the Oxagon still isn't the stupidest part of this project. That title goes to The Line. It's going to be so modern and futuristic that flying pods will take you to your beheading after the Saudi religious police deems you a blasphemer for sharing an article about women's rights. And, believe it or not, its current iteration is a vastly upscaled version of the original concept, which was basically 3 levels with some buildings around the pedestrian level. But they only got more ambitious with time, so now the Line is a 170-kilometer long, 500-meter tall, 200-meter wide mirror-plated skyscraper going through the desert. So what is wrong with this project? Well, what's not wrong with it? Let's take a look. The project itself has some surprisingly neat characteristics. You're always 5 minutes away from amenities, 2 minutes away from nature, and there are no cars or any other emission sources. Also, the whole project is set to be fully powered by renewable energy. And that's great, but they're trying to accomplish all this with a 170-kilometer long hollow skyscraper in the desert. There is a very good reason why we aren't building cities in a line shape, since you needlessly stretch everything out. So you can be 5 minutes away from amenities, but if the amenity you want is on the other end of NEOM, well, now you gotta travel up to 170 kilometers to get to it. Also, the reason why they insist on a line shape is because it's supposedly more compact and prevents sprawling, which is a problem in Saudi Arabia. But sprawling only happens because of cars. Cities that weren't built or bulldozed for cars are all compact and space efficient by nature. So they could have just built a car-free city, but that's not futuristic enough, so now we have the Line. In contrast, if the city was a big cube, or better yet a cylinder, to achieve the 34 square kilometer footprint, instead of cutting through the landscape, you would only need a 3.3 kilometer radius structure. I don't know if the tub would feel as futuristic, but if they're all about efficiency, that's what they should be building. Not to mention, the tub would have less sides exposed to the elements, and you don't even need to drag out utilities for 170 kilometers, leading to better efficiency by an order of magnitude. But once again, that doesn't feel futuristic enough, so we have to do the stupid version that does. And the problem with these pre-planned monstrosities is they cannot account for population growth. They are inflexible. The Line is supposed to have housing for up to 9 million people. What if the population tries to exceed that? Will there be a waiting list? In a regular city, you can either densify or build new districts. With the Line, you're stuck within the dimensions of your mirror-plated desert tube. So if the population tries to outgrow the 9 million mark, things will become unaffordable pretty quickly. But if the population declines, you're going to have massive abandoned sections which you have to maintain nonetheless. You can't just disable or mothball them, because that would cut the Line in two. Speaking of population, this whole futuristic space efficiency looks nice on renders, but it would basically entail living on top of each other in a confined space. The psychological effects of this would be severe, but at least this layout would make it easier to hide from the religious police. Aside from that, since we're building a city in 3D, everything also has to be accessible by low mobility groups. So we're looking at systems of elevators and escalators that take you up to 500 meters, multiplied along the entire length of 170 kilometers. To give you an idea of what this entails, the Empire State Building, which is as tall as NEOM, has to operate 73 elevators to move people around. But let's be charitable and say NEOM will only need 20 elevators for a given section. Let's also throw in 10 escalators for good measure. Suppose we have one of these elevator-escalator systems every 500 meters. That's 6,800 elevators and 3,400 escalators. Yeah. D vitamin deficiency is also going to be an issue. In order to get sunlight, you either have to live on the sunny side or go all the way up to the top. Otherwise, life inside NEOM would be rather depressing. You're locked inside a narrow tube full of buildings with prying eyes on you potentially from all directions at all times. If you want to catch a breather, you can always go outside though, into the open, empty desert. Or you can take NEOM's transportation system, which is just as smart and well thought out as the rest of the project. The planners, I mean CGI artists' idea of transportation inside the line is a metro line, a freight rail line, and some ultra-high-speed whatever running at the bottom all along its entire length. And this is stupid for a number of reasons. First, you have to build 170 kilometers of subway and underground freight rail, so basically 340 kilometers of double-track rail tunnels in total. And then, between those, some kind of techno-bullshit rapid transit that takes you from one end to the other in 20 minutes. So the thing would have to run at least at 510 kilometers per hour, not counting stops along the way. I've heard rumors they want a Hyperloop, you know, that thing Elon Musk admitted to be a scam to try to get California high-speed rail cancelled, but here a regular maglev would also be enough. Otherwise they would have pods, because of course they would, and also air taxis, which has to be the stupidest, most dangerous idea of all. Running a helicopter in a narrow, semi-enclosed space like that within close proximity of public areas and housing. So not only will you go deaf from the noise and blind from the rotor wash creating a tornado of trash and dust, you'd also get blown down into the chasm, if the thing doesn't crash into the walls first due to some erratic turbulence. So you would be using the subway for local transportation and the maglev for long distance. And this is a problem. Since we're going in a straight 170 kilometer long line, if there's any failure at any point, your system is immediately cut in half, not to mention necessary maintenance or overhauls. There would be complete chaos. This is what happens when you have a single transit line serving millions of people. Oh, you wanna ride the subway? Sorry, someone fell on the tracks 150 kilometers down, so now 5 million people are late from work. And if you need to get to the other end but the maglev breaks down, I hope you like traveling 200 stops on the subway for 5 hours, because that's what you're going to do. And these problems could easily be solved if the line was shaped like a regular city, not a fucking line in the desert. Speaking of... if you look at any city on a map, you'll notice one thing. It was either built next to a river or on the coast. Even cities like Medina that appear to be in the middle of nowhere are actually built on top of oases. As for the line's location, there is absolutely nothing there. It's an empty desert, meaning things like food and water would need to be shipped in from elsewhere and then taken along the entire 170 kilometer length of the line. And just how do they plan on going through that mountain range? Will they dig tunnels underneath? Will they excavate the mountain away? What if somewhere along the way the soil is unsuitable for a 500-meter skyscraper? Will the whole thing just sink into the sand then? And this whole fixation they have on space efficiency would be fair enough if they weren't trying to be space efficient out in the open desert where they have virtually limitless space to expand. Speaking of, there is a huge open area right where the line should end. If they really want to build the city of the future in the country of the medieval, they could just do it there. Well, actually, the area isn't completely empty. NEOM is planned to be built on top of the Al-Huwaita tribe's territory, so the Saudi government has already started harassing, forcefully displacing and abducting them. Thus, NEOM will stand on the surest foundation there is: genocide. But the line and NEOM as a whole in their current forms are just not happening. Here's why. On paper, the NEOM project will cost $500 billion. That might sound reasonable until you consider that the price includes a mountain resort complex with a mirror cave and an artificial lake, a half-floating city seaport complex, and a 500-meter tall, 170-kilometer long skyscraper, including 340 kilometers of underground rail and 170 kilometers of maglev. For the sake of perspective, just the volume of the line is equivalent to about 6,000 Empire State Buildings, and just one Empire State Building cost $572 million in today's dollars, and the latter was a regular building, not some techno-magic hocus-pocus fever dream. Also, regular skyscrapers, as bad and pointless as they are, I have a video on that, have the advantage of being built on top of pre-existing city infrastructure. In the case of the line, you have to build out all the utilities and services from scratch, plus hundreds of kilometers of underground transit. All that is to say, NEOM isn't getting built out of $500 billion. By the Saudi dictator's own construction company, mind you. And how this project would be paying for itself is anyone's guess, really. But hey, Indian and Pakistani slave labor provides a great opportunity for cost savings. And there are many more problems I could list, such as how would the line be cooled, how they would combat airborne diseases in that large semi-enclosed space, what if a maglev slams into a structural element and the whole structure just starts dominoing, what about the constant wind stress that the structure would be subject to, how would water be provided for 9 million people in the desert, and so on. Of course, the overarching goal of this project is to create a trade artery between Saudi and Egypt, bypassing Israel, which is fine, but they could do this very easily without all the unsustainable techno bullshit. Want to build a mountain resort? Just build a goddamn goddamn mountain resort. Want to build a seaport? Just build a goddamn seaport. Want to build a sustainable, walkable, emission-free city? Just build one on the coast. We know how to do it. We've been doing it for thousands of years before cars took over our streets. And this is the tragedy of dictators. They can only think in terms of megalomaniacal bullshit projects only to serve their egos and provide huge handouts for themselves and their cronies. The bigger and shinier the project, the bigger the ego and the bigger the handouts. That's the reason why smooth brain dictator plus construction project equals dumb shit. And NEOM is just the latest, biggest, shiniest, dumbest example of that. Oh, and by the way, if I disappear after this video, please have the authorities treat it as a murder. Thanks.